Erica Benedicto. I'm the Diversity Program Manager for the City of Little Rock's Racial and Cultural Diversity Commission. Thank you so much for joining us for our Black History Month celebration, our program. We do this for you, and we love your response when you turn out. First, I want to take the time to inform you all about the Racial and Cultural Diversity Commission if you don't know already. It was established in 1994, and it has the full-time mission of ensuring equal opportunity and the full exercise of civil rights for all of its citizens in the city. The Commission fulfills its mission in a few ways through education, policy development, and cultural celebration. Today is a mix of both of education and cultural celebration, and we're glad to have you here. Before I move on, do we have any commissioners present? Thank you, Paul, for being here. Okay, good. I think some of them, thank you, Trey. And some of them are looking for parking. So if you're not in that situation, you're pretty lucky. Is there any other dignitary or member that I didn't recognize? Okay, well, I'll move on. Our theme for this program is called Our Stories, Our Lives, Our Matters, celebrating African American publications and publishers. Long before the phrase became a hashtag, John Harold Johnson, founder of Ebony and Jet magazines, in so many words told us that Black lives matter. Who among us can remember how Ebony magazines graced the coffee tables of our parents' homes, our mothers' homes? And for some of us, they still hold a special place in our living room. Johnson told us that our stories, our lives, our accomplishments were worth writing about, and our pictures were worth taking. When interviewed, Mr. Johnson said that his goal was to show not only African Americans, but to also show white people that Blacks got married, had beauty contests, gave parties, ran successful businesses, and did all the things of normal life just like anyone else. With Ebony and Jet magazines, John Johnson did exactly what he set out to do. Another source of pride, and many of us already know this, but in 1918, John Harold Johnson was born right here in Arkansas City, Arkansas, so he has Arkansas roots. So we really should be proud for more than one reason. Speaking of another great that has Arkansas roots, Ozell Sutton. Ozell Sutton was also born in Arkansas in a town outside of Gould. He was a graduate of Philander Smith College, and he repeatedly made Ebony's magazine's list of the 100 most influential African Americans. Sutton was a trailblazer of sorts. In 1950, Sutton became the first Black reporter to be hired by a white-owned newspaper, the Arkansas Democrat. Once hired, Sutton used his position and influence to portray Blacks fairly and respectfully in the paper. It's been noted in the Encyclopedia of Arkansas that one of his quests was simply to convince the newspaper to address Blacks by Mr. and Miss, just as whites were addressed. Sutton's editors eventually relented due to his persistence. Ozell Sutton's activism did not stop there. It was just the beginning. On July 15, 1964, 2 weeks after the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which, by the way, required desegregation of public facilities and accommodations, Sutton decided it was time to desegregate the Arkansas Capitol's cafeteria. So he entered, picked up a tray, found his place in a food line, and of course we know how the story often goes. He was refused service. An all too familiar story when it comes to our civil rights history. To evade the civil rights laws, the state's cafeteria attempted to privatize, thereby avoiding the desegregation requirements. Eventually, Sutton, along with NAACP lawyers, sued in federal court and was ultimately successful in desegregating this public facility. Sutton, a consummate civil rights activist, was along Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s side during the March for Equal Rights in Selma, Alabama in 1965. 3 years later, Sutton was in the Memphis, Tennessee hotel when King was assassinated in 1968, as reported by the Associated Press. Sutton's activism and trailblazing accomplishments go on, and he was one of the first African Americans to serve the United States Marine Corps and received the Congressional Gold Medal in 2012 for his work in the U.S. Marine Corps. It's been said by his daughter that he was also a very loving husband and a wonderful father. Sutton passed at the ripe age of 90 in December of 2015, but his legacy and work will live forever. Our world is better because he lived. So just want to take a moment, just a minute, to just remember Ozell Sutton and his contributions to not only our community, but to our world. And as we move on, I'd like to talk about journalists, African American writers, publishers, and publications. Journalists have always had powerful opportunity to educate their community and to advance civil rights and to write about matters that mean something to them. With their founding of the Arkansas State Press, a weekly newspaper that frequently featured stories on civil rights and highlighted the achievements of African Americans, Daisy and Elsie Bates understood this power more than anyone. Before we move on in this program, I'd like to call up Mr. Scott Green from the Central Arkansas Association of Black Journalists. He will tell us what this organization does and what its mission is. Thank you.
Good morning. Derica and those of you who are gathered here today. My name is Scott Green. I am the Special Events Coordinator for the Central Arkansas Association of Black Journalists. Today I am here to give a little bit of history on the organization and what it means, and perhaps even to encourage some of you to not only take notice but even become involved. The first affiliation with the National Association of Black Journalists is recorded to have taken place somewhere around 1985 and ran for about 10 years and kind of fizzled out a little bit. But through the efforts of some people who really think that diversity in media is important in our community, in 2008 it was revived. In fact, our president is here today, manning one of the cameras behind you, Mr. Ray Hamilton, who is a staff on staff of Channel 7 News. The mission of the Central Arkansas Association of Black Journalists is very simple: to provide continued professional development and training for established journalists, to recognize exemplary professionals that honor and achieve media excellence, and to financially support the scholastic endeavors of aspiring journalists. Now, the need for diverse media representation is a little bit more complicated, but I like to sum it up in one word: respect. Any given day, you can listen to, read, and visually see what someone has decided is important in terms of news. And it's a decision. It's one made by choice. Out of all the events and activities that are taking place in the world, someone decides what's important for you to hear and to know. And as a listener, as a reader, you're the recipient of their choices and ultimately their perspective. And so by and large, your ideas and what you identify with is shaped by someone who is giving you the information. For a long time, it was a push to become involved in those created circumstances and systems that change might be made from within. But as we all know, he who controls the goal makes the rules. Central Arkansas Association of Black Journalists exists not to change the rules, but to change the dynamic of who delivers the news. And so therefore we encourage responsibility, which is another big word, because that means that you have to do the work rather than allowing someone to do the work for you. There are gifted and capable and talented people who sometimes don't get the opportunity to do the work. There is a limit, like in anything, that reaches its full capacity when there is no more room. Sometimes it's determined by actual physical presence, and sometimes it's just determined by something as simple as greed. And some people are invited to the party, and then there are others that are not. And in some cases, some people are excused from the party. As an organization, we want to encourage more parties. Throw your own party. Represent yourself. Say what you have to say about the matter. We oftentimes hear the old adage that if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? Is the question. Well, only if there's someone there to tell that the tree fell. There are also two sides to every story. Actually, three. Your version, mine, and the truth. But if you don't tell your story, you're going to allow someone else to tell your story. And then they're going to tell you what happened, when it happened, and why it happened. Is it the truth? Maybe. But the more involved you are, the more involved we are as public citizens, the more likely it is that the truth is going to come out. And so we are holding ourselves responsible as an organization to encourage more truth to be told. I'm going to try to close this out with a little personal story. As a child of about 10 years of age, as it was mentioned in the opening remarks, I used to sell the State Press and the Southern Mediator Journal. I'd go from door to door in my neighborhood and knock. Someone would come to the door and they would see me peering up at them. I wasn't as tall then as I'm now. I'm actually taller now. And someone would come to the door and they would see me and I'm holding up the newspaper and it was 50 cents. And they would decide whether or not they wanted to make that purchase. Now let me tell you, this is how it would happen. Baby, somebody's here selling the paper. And someone, I hear a voice in the background, well, go on and get one. Or someone would come to the door and they would say, no, I don't want one today. Occasionally someone would recognize me from the neighborhood and say, well, you know, that's Mr. Hughes' grandson. So I was just getting a little favor. Or Miss Green's grandson. Or, and I can say this. Or they would say, oh, you know, that's Ernie Green's nephew. And they would buy the paper. Now, I picked these papers up from Mr. Daniels' service station, right there. For those of you all from Little Rock, they used to be, and it's still there, but it's not operating necessarily as a service station anymore, fueling station. Right there at the corner of 19th and Chester. Bundles of newspapers. And the idea was to sell them until you got tired of selling them, or until someone got tired of buying them. And you just walked the neighborhood. I just walked the neighborhood. And sometimes I'd go to the same door that didn't want one last week that, well, somebody's gonna buy one this week. In that instance, it was free enterprise. In that instance, it was Daisy and Elsie Bates telling the story. It was the Southern Mediator Journal telling the story. Unfortunately, today there is no State Press. There is no Southern Mediator Journal. There have been other papers that come along since then, but there's nobody telling that side of the story. So then the question becomes, who's going to tell the story? Who's going to take responsibility for at least putting out a weekly newspaper, 52 weeks out of the year, every week, on time. On time. Not the next day, not the following Monday, but on time. And so there's a challenge. There's a challenge to tell the story. We want to encourage young people who are still in high school looking for careers and ways to earn a living, who have the gift of gab, who can stand in front of a microphone and just talk, like, really? Or who can write, and who can look at a situation and give you the facts, the who, what, when, where, and why. And that will make room for them when other people either don't want to make room for them or may not be able to. We have the internet now, folk can blog. You know, you have more people now giving their opinion about things than ever in recorded history. And it is historical because it's there forever. We can shape our communities and our neighborhoods. We can encourage people to becoming more involved. We can keep them informed of what's happening by telling our story. So if nothing else I've said today, become involved. Take the time to tell your story. Miss Lady, this is a plug, unsolicited. Miss Lady Magazine. Now, they changed the name. What was the new name again?
ML Community and Lifestyle.
ML Community and Lifestyle. And there are others that are here and in the community that can tell our story. I don't think we should have to force anyone to tell our story. It's okay. We're not trying to boycott. Boycott means to punish. There's no need to punish anybody. If you go to a restaurant, you don't like their food, then you just don't go back. You go spend your money somewhere else. So it doesn't have to be punitive, but it has to be decisive, and it should be by choice. I choose to do this. I choose to support this. I choose to make this happen. Stay on the positive. Stay on the positive. And let's change, improve, enlighten, inform, educate. That the people that the stories are being told about are just regular people. Just regular people. As it was mentioned, they get married, they have babies, they graduate from colleges. They do things that normal people do. But you don't often hear about it. But we have that responsibility as the Central Arkansas Association of Black Journalists to encourage that the story be told. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Couldn't have said it better. Very important points that you made. As a matter of fact, it reminds me of an African proverb, and I'll share it with you. Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunters. There is power in telling your own story. As a matter of fact, that is the greatest form of empowerment, is telling your own story from your perspective. Okay, so we have some people who have done that or is doing that right now, and we want to highlight them.